Chapter 19 Magic. Dr. Craven was waiting for them when they got back to the house. "You have stayed outside too long," he said to Colin. "You must be more careful." "But I'm not tired," answered Colin. "I feel better, and tomorrow I shall stay outside all day." Dr. Craven did not look pleased about this, but he knew that he could not stop Colin. After he had gone, Mary said to Colin, "I feel sorry for Dr. Craven." "Why?" asked Colin. "Because he won't give Miss Womano." "No," answered Mary, "because he must be nice to you, although you are unkind to him." "Am I unkind?" asked Colin. "Yes, you are," answered Mary. She was not being unkind herself. She wanted to tell Colin the truth. "No one has ever done anything that you didn't. Like because you were always ill. But I'm not ill now. I'm going to get better," he said. "And I'm not going to be unkind again." "Good," said Mary. "The garden and its magic will help you, because there is magic in the garden." During the next few months, there really was magic in the garden. The children went there every day, and as Colin grew stronger, the garden grew more and more beautiful. There were flowers everywhere, and the roses were wonderful. Colin watched each change carefully, and Dickon told him and Mary about the plants and flowers and the animals and the birds. Each day Colin worked and worked more. This was the real magic of the garden. It made Colin want to get better, and he did. One day he walked all around the garden. Mary and Dickon walked on each side of him. Ben with the staff walked behind them, and all Dickon's animals came at the end. They walked very slowly, and they stopped often, but Colin was very happy. "The magic is making me strong," he cried. "The magic is in me." When he was back in his wheelchair under the tree, he said, "I'm not going to tell Dr. Craven that I'm better. This is to be the greatest secret to all. I'm not going to tell anyone until I can run and walk like Dickon. I shall come here every day in my wheelchair. Then when my father comes home, I shall walk into his room and say, 'Here I am, I'm very well, and I'm going to live to be a man. The magic of the garden has helped me.'" "He won't believe you," Mary said, and she laughed. "He'd think that he is a slave." There was one thing which was difficult for Colin now. He was hungry all the time. He was frightened that the servants might learn about his secret because he ate so much. It was strange that a sick boy could eat so much. Colin and his friends did not know what to do, but then Dickon told his mother, and she had a plan. Every day she gave Dickon fresh bread for Mary and Colin. After that, Colin did not want to eat so much at meal times. Poor Dr. Craven, he did not know what to think. Before Colin went out into the gardens, every day he ate nothing. Then, when he first went out, he ate much more, but now suddenly he did not eat again. It was very strange. But there was something even more strange, although Colin was not eating again. He was still growing fatter, but no one learned what the secret was. Colin told no one where they went, although Dr. Craven often asked him. The three children were outside all day when it wasn't raining. Colin grew stronger and fatter all the time. One day, Colin said to Mary, "I wish my father would come home. I want to tell him the secret myself, but I think that the servants are going to learn about it soon. I'm getting quite fat, and I don't look the same. I wish that the magic would bring my father home." Chapter 20 Mary and Colin meet Dickon's mother. One day, after it had rained for a week, Mary, Colin and Dickon were in the garden again, working hard, when suddenly Colin stopped. "Mary, Dickon," he cried, "look at me. I'm really well at last. It's real. I'm well." He had thought about it for such a long time, and now it was true. He felt very happy. I will live forever and ever, he shouted, because the magic has helped me. Just then he looked towards the door of the garden. Who is that? He asked. Who is it? A woman was standing by the door. She had a very kind face and she was laughing. Deacon ran across the grass. It's mother, she shouted. And Mary and Colin ran too. I knew that you wanted to see her, said Deacon, and so I told her where to find the door. Colin was very happy. I have always wanted to see you, Mrs. Sowerby, he told her. Even when I was ill, you and Deacon and the garden were the first things that I wanted to see in my whole life. Mrs. Sowerby did not say anything. She just looked kindly at the three young faces around her. Are you surprised that I am so well? Colin asked her next. Yes, I am, she answered. And I'm so surprised because you look so like your mother. Do you think my father will like me? Colin asked her. He was very frightened that his father would not want to see him. He had seen his father so little in his life that he thought his father didn't like him. I'm sure he will, Colin, she answered. But Weatherstaff came into the garden just then. Well, Mrs. Sowerby, he said, what do you think of Colin? Hasn't he grown strong? I can't believe that 2 months ago his legs were so thin that he couldn't walk. I think he is wonderful, Deacon's mother said, and then she turned to Mary. And you have grown strong and healthy too, Mary. You are a pretty girl now. I'm sure that you are like your mother too. Then they showed Mrs. Sowerby everything in the garden, every tree and plant that had come alive. Mary and Colin liked her very much. She was so kind and quiet. At last, Colin asked her, do you believe in magic? Yes, I do, she answered. There are many names for it, but I know what you mean. Colin and Mary were very pleased when they heard this. Mrs. Sowerby had brought a breakfast of food with her. After they had walked around the garden, they sat down under one of the fruit trees. They ate a great deal, and while they ate, Mrs. Sowerby told them many stories about her children and the moor and Yorkshire. They laughed a great deal. Shh, said Colin. We must make so much noise. Someone might hear us. Oh, Mrs. Sowerby, it's so difficult. When we are together, we want to laugh all the time, and we mustn't. Then he said quietly, do you think that my father will come home soon? Yes, he'll come home soon, she answered. He must come home. He'll be very happy when he sees you, Colin. Then they talked about other things. They made plans for a visit to Mrs. Sowerby's house, and then too soon it was time for her to go, and for Colin and Mary to go back to the house. Before Deacon's mother left, Colin stood in front of her and said, I wish you were my mother as well as Deacon's. Her face looked almost sad when he said this. She put her arms around him and said, Dear Colin, your father must come home soon. He must. Chapter 21. In the Garden. While Mary was at Mr. Manor, she learned something very important. She learned not to think only about herself, but she thought a great deal about Deacon and his animals, about the secret garden, and about Colin. She probably did not know that she had changed, but after 6 months, she was a much nicer child. Colin changed in the same way. Before he met Mary, he had thought only about himself, about his illness, his hunchback, and his sadness. But when he met Mary and Deacon and visited the secret garden every day, he began to change. While these changes were happening at Miss Lee's Manor, Colin's father was traveling in countries far away from England. He visited Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, and Italy. He never stayed in one place for long, and he was always very sad. He thought only about his dead wife, his sick son, and his own sadness. One day, at the end of summer, he was in Italy. He was sitting in a quiet garden, and he fell asleep. While he slept, he remembered his wife. He thought he could hear her calling to him. "Where are you, my dear?" he asked. "I'm in the garden." "In the garden?" she answered. Soon after he woke up, and later he walked back to the house where he was staying. There was a letter for him. He opened it, and this is what it said. "Dear Mr. Craven, I hope that you will not be angry because I have written to you. You must come home to Mithwaite Manor. Please, Mr. Craven, it is very important. Please come back as soon as possible. Yours sincerely, Susan Sowerby." Mr. Craven read the letter twice. "I'll go back to Mithwaite. I'll go now," he said. A few days later, he was back in Yorkshire. He began to feel happier, but he did not know why. During the journey, he thought a great deal about Colin and about Mrs. Sowerby's letter. He wondered why she had written to him. He did not know her very well, but he knew that she was a kind woman and good mother. What was so important? Then he remembered what his wife had said while he was sleeping in the quiet garden in Italy. As soon as he reached Mithwaite Manor, he saw Mrs. Medlock. His first question was, "How is Colin, Mrs. Medlock?" "Well, Mr. Craven," she answered slowly. He is not the same." "Is he still sick?" Mr. Craven asked. "Well, we don't know," Mrs. Medlock answered. "Why not?" "Well, he's getting fatter, but he doesn't eat anything. He seems to be happier, and he even laughs with Minnie Lennox and Dickon Sowerby. But he is the same as ever with Dr. Craven and me." "Where is he now?" Mr. Craven asked. "In the garden," Mrs. Medlock answered. "In the garden?" Mr. Craven cried. "In the garden!" Those were the words that his wife had said to him in his sleep. He went out into the gardens. He walked slowly because he was thinking about the 10 years since his wife's death. He wondered why he was going back to her garden after so many years. When he got to the place where he had hidden the key, he stopped. "How strange," he thought. "I can hear children's voices, and yet no one has been inside this garden for 10 years. The sounds grew clearer. They were laughing. Suddenly, a boy came through the door. He was running so fast that he almost made Craven fall over. He was a tall, good-looking boy with dark hair and big eyes. Mr. Craven knew at once who he was. "Who? What? Who?" he cried. Mary was standing near Colin, and she heard him say, "Father, I'm Colin. Can you believe it?" Mr. Craven could only say quietly, "In the garden, in the garden." "Yes," said Colin, "I'm better because of the garden. The garden and Mary and Dickon and his animals and the magic made me better. No one knows I'm better. It has been a secret. I wanted you to know first." Mr. Craven was so happy that he could not speak. "Aren't you glad, Father?" Colin asked him. "Aren't you glad? I'm going to live forever and ever." The garden was very beautiful in the late summer. Mr. Craven looked at everything. "I thought it would be dead," he said. "So did Mary," said Colin, "but it has come alive." They all sat under a tree, and Colin told the story of the secret garden. They laughed happily about the robin and bin stuff and the garden and the secret. At last Colin said, "It'll not be a secret any more. The servants will be very frightened when they see me, but I am never going to sit in that wheelchair again. I will walk back to the house with you, Father." And he did. All the servants were watching as Mr. Craven and his son walked back to the house together. Colin looked very happy, and so did his father. And Colin looked as healthy as any boy in Yorkshire. The end. Thank you.